Hey there, church family. This week we started with the book of Acts. And in Acts 2, we have a foundational moment in the church. The 12 disciples are gathered together, and the Spirit of God descends on them, and flames of fire descend on each of their heads. Do you remember back in Exodus, when Moses sets up the tabernacle, and fire and smoke come and fill the tent? Or maybe when Solomon consecrated the temple that he built. Fire and smoke come down and fill the temple and show that God's presence has entered that building. Just like those times, fire comes down and marks these followers of Jesus as the new temple. They are the place where God's presence dwells. That's what it means to have God's Spirit in us. The Spirit of God filled them, and they become the new temple of God, the place where God's Spirit dwells with mankind. And that's what we find in the book of Acts. The Spirit indwells these men, and Christ begins to use them to spread his kingdom on earth. And the Spirit empowers them in their mission. And a few things keep happening in the book that we read this week and follow throughout the book of Acts. First, we find the disciples' lives begin to look a lot like Jesus' life. We find the apostles preaching the gospel wherever the Spirit sends them. And wherever they go, they also perform miracles. God works through them to show their role as Christ's apostles. Also, large crowds of people start to believe in Christ. Wherever they go, the Spirit of God is at work in them and in the crowds that listen to them to bring people to salvation. But there's also major persecution, just like Jesus experienced. We find the Jewish leaders locking up the disciples. Stephen is executed. And this gospel that is preached divides people. Later on, we'll read of Gentile cities and riots happening because of the gospel that is preached, when people begin to see that the gospel overturns society. The other major thing that we found in our reading was the inclusion of Gentiles. The Ethiopian eunuch, whom Philip evangelizes, in the household of Cornelius, whom Peter is sent to. People who have not been part of God's chosen people are brought in. The gospel goes out to the world. Good news is preached to all nations. That's what we find in the book of Acts. And all these join into one church, and a new society is forming, one that isn't built on race or on language or on social status, but people are brought together based on their allegiance to Christ. Wherever the gospel goes, people turn from their old way of life and they devote themselves to Jesus. The book of Acts shows us how the gospel spreads and how Christ's kingdom advances. And just like them, we are called to respond to that gospel message today. And then to witness to his word to those around us as Christ's kingdom advances in our town.